Okay, so let's get started. Hi, this is Tim Brick, and I'm the Managing Director of the Arroyo Seco Foundation. And welcome to our Arroyo Currents. This is actually the second Arroyo Currents that we're doing. And we did one a couple of weeks ago. And also, Among the Native Plant Nursery, which is run by the Arroyo Seco Foundation, is also doing online Zoom meetings and has had two very successful ones. One of them was on how to grow a native garden in Los Angeles, and the second one was with regard to telling the story of hummingbirds. It was really a fascinating presentation by Benny Schwartz, and it's really something to watch if you get a opportunity to see it. Tonight we're going to talk about Pasadena's water crisis. And there's a whole series of things that are happening that we'd like to go over with you and talk about and explain because they're very important. Pasadena is really setting the tone here for the next 25 years in terms of how they manage water. So we're going to begin with our presentations this evening. As I said earlier, I'm Tim Brick, Managing Director of the Arroyo Seco Foundation. I do want to let you know I have a little bit of background in water. I was thinking the other day that I first got associated with Pasadena Water and Power Department in 1979, believe it or not. I was on the Utility Commission. They had a Utility Commission in Pasadena for 14 years. And then I also represented the city of Pasadena on the board of directors of the Metropolitan Water District, where I was chairman from 2006 to 2010. So I have some background in water and water resources and know something about what's going on in Pasadena with regard to water and looking to both the past and the future. So our other featured speakers this evening are Maury Wolfson, who was formerly with the Environmental Advisory Commission for 6 years in the city of Pasadena, and he was a member of the Water System and Resources Stakeholder Group that met last year to put together Pasadena's water plan for the future. We're also going to hear from Ken Cools, who is a veteran water engineer with the Metropolitan Water District. He was only there for 21 years. It's funny, I didn't know Ken when he was at Metropolitan, although we were there at the same time. But that was one of the differences between directors and staff. And Ken also used to work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so after presentations on these issues that we're going to present, we'll then have the opportunity for you to ask questions and get answers and discuss things, discuss some of the issues. So I wanted to, I wanted to go to show you the page that we've put together that kind of ties a lot of this together and will give you the opportunity to really study these issues a lot further as we move ahead. And that's the page that is on the Arroyo Seco website, and it's called the Water Crisis page. So it's www.arroyoseco.org/watercrisis.htm. And we start with this chart. And you might be wondering what this chart really represents, but it's really a pretty ominous chart, which shows the decline of groundwater levels in the Pasadena area for more than the last 100 years. And it's particularly ominous because it's reaching a real critical point. And also because there have been attempts over the years to set up a sustainable groundwater management program, but clearly they haven't succeeded in developing a sustainable groundwater program. So it was with these lenses on with regard to groundwater management that we really looked at the plan that Pasadena is proposing as the water resources plan for the future. And we're going to tell you a lot more about the background and how we got here. And but it kind of reminds you of the old blues song, "You don't miss your water till the well runs dry," because that's literally what's happening. We've been living on local water, which represents about 30% of the local supply, 35%, for many decades. And the local water is cheaper. And so there's been a tendency to rely heavily on it because it's cheaper than the water that comes from the Metropolitan Water District. But now the local supply is threatened. The groundwater basin is literally threatened. We could lose that very valuable resource. And imported sources are also more expensive and less reliable. So if you look at this page here, what I tried to do was to set up for you a resource place where you could go to look at all these things and test all of the hypotheses that you have and look at, understand how the planning has gone on and see, if you agree or disagree with some of the things that we're going to say about the water crisis and the groundwater situation. And you can actually look for yourself in the really basic, sources. So if you click on the links there at the bottom, this one goes to Pasadena's water crisis. But obviously, some of the challenges are challenges that people have had, that Pasadena has had, since people first settled here. But they've gotten worse in many cases. So erratic weather is one of those challenges. And contamination is a very serious challenge. There's a variety of different kinds of contamination that have affected Pasadena's water and could affect it in the future as well. So water quality and providing healthy drinking water is a real big challenge. Aging infrastructure is another one. The infrastructure in Pasadena, many of the pipes are 80 or even 100 years old. So there's
that's a great
limited lifespan for those for pipes and such, and many of them need to be replaced. Also, the increasing unreliability of imported sources and the rapid rise of the cost of imported sources and new supplies as well. But the one that is most ominous in the immediate period of time is that declining groundwater levels could lead to the loss of the Raymond Basin, which provides 35% of our supply. And it's a rather inexpensive part of the supply compared to the outside supplies coming in. And probably the most serious implication of losing the Raymond Basin is that it would make it very difficult for Pasadena to deal with emergencies in the future if MWD isn't able to provide water during a long extended drought or a major earthquake in the state or other kinds of catastrophes like that. Without the local groundwater sources backup, we would really be in very serious situations. So, and of course, all of this is aggravated by the uncertainty of climate change. Now, there's information here about all of these different kinds of things, these different challenges that I outline here. But I wanted to also put in context planning in Pasadena and planning for water, that we're part of a statewide situation. And Governor Newsom has taken rural leadership with regard to water planning and recognizing the big problems that face us with regard to water in the state of California. And last year in April, he issued an executive order, and the executive order instructs California to get ready to deal with all of these challenges, including overpumping and over-reliance on groundwater basins, declining fish populations, and all of that, to deal with these challenges for the future in a very constructive and positive way. And so as a result of that, and here on these links on the right side of the screen, you can see the governor's executive order and California's Water Resilience Plan, which was released a few months ago, and is really an outstanding plan that takes very seriously the environmental impacts of water, as well as all of the challenges that we've talked about here. So, and there's also a new document that's just come out from the Public Policy Institute of California called Priorities for California Water. It's really a remarkable document that is full of interesting perspectives, hard facts, and a lot of important information about how to prioritize the future water in California. So this is, and then there's a document also, a link there if you'd like to get into it, about creating water resilient utilities, and that comes from EPA, and it talks about how to go with what kind of policies need to be done with implemented in order to meet the challenges of the future. So really, California is putting a big stress on developing a resilient water supply. And that means a water supply that is full of adaptive management and flexible in order to meet the challenges as they come in the future. That isn't really locked into old solutions, sometimes engineering solutions that were really limited in the way that they approach it. So, and that's what we're saying that Pasadena really needs to do. Pasadena needs to develop a resilient water supply for the future. Now, the groundwater is of particular importance because of the Raymond Basin situation. And so here we have a page that just looks at the groundwater crisis, the Raymond Basin groundwater crisis. And it answers a lot of questions about what is the crisis about. And it begins, though, with just basic facts on what is groundwater, how does it work, what are aquifers, how do they interact with surface water, how do they interact with the community, where does the water flow. It's really very interesting, the groundwater 101 thing. Dr. Thomas Harder provides a very good basic understanding of groundwater. And then we have on the right side, we also have an article on the history of the Raymond Basin. And this is really very important because in the 1940s, Pasadena was really a leader in terms of effective groundwater management. And our predecessors saw that the groundwater level was declining from the turn of the century to the last century. It was declining. So by the time it hit 1940, it had already fallen about, let's see, that's about, well over 100 feet. And so Pasadena got together with the other local pumpers and established a court procedure. The lawsuit was called City of Pasadena versus City of Alhambra. And they worked for 6 years or more to develop a mutual agreement as to what's a fair way of dividing up the water resources for our region. And how can we do it in a way that will protect the groundwater resources for the future? And so that's what they did. They established what's called a safe yield. This was the first adjudication of a groundwater basin in California. So it was a really big, important step forward. And it was supposed to provide for a sustainable supply for the future. It was supposed to match pumping or extractions from the groundwater basin with the natural replenishment of the basin that occurs through rainfall. And as you can see from this chart, that clearly didn't happen. So what does a declining groundwater level like this mean? Well, first of all, it means that wells are going to dry up and the groundwater basin is going to dry up. The water beneath us, the groundwater basin beneath us is like a large bowl of sand and gravel. And it isn't a bottomless pit, you know, it is, you know, kind of related to the bedrock that underlies Pasadena. Of course, Pasadena is part of an alluvial zone that is of sand and sediment that is washed down from the mountains. And that's why there's a groundwater basin here. And so there's about somewhere between 600 to 1,000 feet, 600 to 1,000 feet of sand and gravel that the water is in at lower levels. So as the groundwater falls, there is a bottom to it, and it can create incredible deterioration of water quality as it falls. You can actually even have land subsidence, which has happened in other parts of the state. It doesn't seem to have happened much in Pasadena, but it's happened pretty severely in some other parts of the Central Valley where you've had land subsidence of 20 feet and more. And you have also increased pumping costs, and you lose a lot of your pumps as well. So you have to start all over and put in new pumps because the groundwater level fell. And you have, most importantly, the loss of a very valuable water resource that is particularly important in kind of moderating the cost of supply, but also very important in emergency situations, as we described before. So here we have another one. You know, we have information that Maury and Ken are going to talk about will Pasadena's water supply, their new water plan, will it affect the groundwater level? And unfortunately, the project really relies heavily on a series of programs that will increase groundwater pumping without providing for any systematic approach to stabilizing the groundwater level and protecting the Raymond Basin. And they're going to give more details on exactly that as we go. So, and then there's another section here on Pasadena's long-range plan. And Maury Wolfson's going to make the presentation on that and talk about what's exactly. We're going to show you the link to exactly Pasadena's plan itself. And then Maury has some slides that comment on various aspects of that program. And then finally, Ken Cools is going to talk about the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, which is a project that Pasadena is involved in, has been involved in for 12 years, in which they intend to expand the spreading basins at the mouth of the canyon, coming out of the mountains there. And they're going to do that in order to get the right to pump more water from the groundwater basin. So they're going to take more stream flow and put it into the groundwater briefly, and then they'll pump it out. And by expanding the spreading basins, they will get credits that will allow them to pump even more water out of the groundwater basin. So, and it hasn't been clear to a lot of people that that's really the purpose. Now, the Arroyo Seco Foundation, of course, is very concerned about Haamungna and what's going on at Haamungna. And we know that Haamungna is really the most unique habitat zone in our region, totally, because of the very different kinds of habitat that exists there. 5 major types of habitat in a very small area. So it's really a wonderful treasure for wildlife and birds and people as well. But if you look at the county's maintenance program that they've designed recently and that they're going to implement every year, the maintenance zone is going to be largely bulldozed, and critical habitat is largely going to be destroyed in that area that's there in yellow. And the city already has spreading basins that already extend all along the east side of the basin here, 13 spreading basins. But they're going to expand those spreading basins with this, I don't know what color that is, orange or something, where the new basins are up there. So we're very concerned also about the biological impacts of their project, as well as the water resource implications. We're very strongly supportive of conservation and better utilizing local water resources, but it has to be done in a way that also protects environmental values and protects fish and wildlife. And the environmental impact report, for instance, that the city has put together on this plan, it's going to go to the city council probably, well, to a hearing officer probably in December, and to the city council probably in January. But it totally ignores the responsibility that the city has for fish and other things like that. It basically denies that there's any fish in the arroyo, which, if that's the case, it'll be the first time in all recorded history that there is no fish in the Arroyo Seco. Fish have been here for millions of years, literally. So that's Ken's going to talk about that and what the real impetus behind the Arroyo Seco Canyon project is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maury to tell us a bit more about Pasadena's water plan. There we go.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for putting this together, Tim. Some of you have met me. Most of you know Tim for his many decades of work on these topics. I'm a relative newcomer to this topic, although I've been at it for about 4 or 5 years is all. I come mainly from the electric power sector understandings, where I worked as a professional with the Public Utilities Commission in Colorado and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. But water is a new one for me, and it is quite different than the electric power sector. But I've been able to transfer a lot of my knowledge.
It doesn't matter, does it?
So what I'd like to do is just give my thanks to Tim and to the Arroyo Seco Foundation. And I work closely with Ken Cools over the years. It's been great.
Too many of us.
I want to focus in on what the city has planned. It's called the Water System Resource Plan. I'll just call it the plan over and over, just to keep it simple. And many of the slides that you'll see are slides that were prepared by Pasadena Water and Power. And you will see that on many of those slides, I have placed my own comments in green. So many of them are not my slides. I'm using mainly PWP slides, and my comments are offered in green. So this is to let you know that this is coming in front of the City Council. Of course, we have a municipal utility. We're not regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. It's the City Council that serves as almost like the Public Utilities Commission. And what is being proposed is going to be in front of the City Council here in January and February. So there's two major things that are happening. One is the water plan, which I will discuss, and the other one, which Tim and Ken have discussed, but I will not be touching on that. The utility, Pasadena Water and Power, held two meetings back in November 2019 to receive some feedback on their plan. Although there may have been an effort to get people to attend, very few people did attend. And so we're kind of making up for lost time, where a lot of people don't know that this is going on. And they would want to know now, because it is, again, it's coming in front of the City Council. PWP did produce an excellent PowerPoint that describes the plan, and it's available on their website. So I encourage you all, if you want to learn about this plan, you just go to the City of Pasadena, PWP, look under water, and then it'll take you there to reports, and you'll see the plan there. I'm going to not read through all of this, but these are some recommendations that I have come up with. I haven't been working with others to try to work out the language, but this is just a starting point for thoughts that I have as to what I would like to recommend. But I'm open for some changes here. Instead of going through all of these things right now, though, I'm going to come back to these because I'm going to be repeating them in the final slide. But a lot of it has to do with the Raymond Basin and about the Arroyo Seco, and to address the question of leaking infrastructure, and that we really do need a lot more public education on water conservation and how the water system works in Pasadena. And then we also need a more equitable budget-based pricing rate structure so that efficiency and conservation can really start to take off in Pasadena. This is the timeline. Tim mentioned a few of these things, but there have been, there's a water master plan, and the process for this, for the existing plan started around early 2019, and there have been presentations to the Environmental Advisory Commission. There have been public meetings, and the plan was essentially completed back in early 2020, but it was delayed due to the COVID. Just recently, there was a presentation to the plan's stakeholder group. Both Ken and I were on that and attended many meetings that PWP and their consultants put together. Then in October, the draft of the plan was then finally made available for the public to review. Then just recently, the PWP did present to the Environmental Advisory Commission. So here's what is in front of us. You can see there's some question marks because you never really know exactly when these things will be put on the agenda. But if you stay tuned to the Arroyo Seco Foundation, then the Arroyo Seco Foundation will be providing any updates as to when these events will happen. Ken Cools will be talking about the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, and there's a final environmental impact report on that. That's going to go in front of a hearing officer or maybe the City Council. Then it's going to go to the City Council, and we don't know if that's in December or January. It could even be in February. We don't really know. And then this is all very tentative as well, but there has been some mention of January 26th as a target for when PWP will present the plan to a new Municipal Services Committee. Two members of the committee are no longer going to be on that committee, so it's going to be up to the new mayor to make appointments to the Municipal Services Committee. And then what is tentatively planned is that after it goes to the Municipal Services Committee, then it's going to go to the city council. So every step of the way is an opportunity for citizens to participate. Okay, and that's one of the things I'm going to end the presentation on, is to encourage how you can participate. So what is the plan? Well, it's a 25-year plan for $435 million that addresses all these issues: water supply, distribution, water storage, and other things. Now, they're not equally distributed, but these are the big categories, and this is, again, 435 for 25 years. And it's a blueprint. It doesn't lock the PWP into doing exactly what's in this plan. It's just a broad general framework and a blueprint that they can point to when they want some money to do something. They could say it's consistent with their plan. So it looks roughly like this: about $300 million for distribution. That's pipes, okay? And a lot of these pipes are getting old. This is the $40 million is for storage. Like, for example, they have to spend $33 million to redo the Sunset Reservoir, which is over 100 years old. And this was an area that we're particularly interested in, because this gets back to the question of the Raymond Basin. This next slide that I'm going to show you, it really breaks down the specifics of what is in the plan, because there were 6 different proposals that were analyzed, and PWP selected portfolio F. And they called that the maximized value of the groundwater non-potable supplies. Well, if you look at these yellow arrows, these yellow arrows add up to $27 million, you know, out of the 76. So that's a third of the money is all related in some way to the Arroyo Seco project, which Ken's going to be talking about. This red arrow is the amount that they propose to put into conservation. Well, and, you know, in my view, I think it's widely shared, that is not nearly enough of what is needed in order to be able to address the issues that we face. So this is a PWP slide. Most of you know that we get 65% of our water coming in from the north with the State Water Project, or from the east through the Colorado River Aqueduct. And 35% is from the Raymond Basin. And in the past, of course, it was 100% when we first settled the area, and it's been going down, 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 and it's continuing to go down. The only other source you could get is, aside from rainwater, is from the Metropolitan Water District. It's essentially a monopoly provider. There's no other water sources other than the Metropolitan Water District. So the imported water is first delivered to MWD, and then every year it changes, because it depends on the amount of snowpack that's up there. And so the state of California will tell the Metropolitan Water District how much water they can expect. Same thing happens with the Department of Interior with how much water can come to LA from the Colorado River Aqueduct. I put this in red because this is key for you to understand, is that PWP pays $1,000 per acre foot for that water. So here's something which is relatively new to my understanding. For people in the industry, they've known this for years, is that there are seismic threats with the San Andreas Fault. What you see here is the San Andreas Fault is in red here, and this is the water that's coming down from the north. So you could have breaks along the aqueduct. You could also have breaks along the Colorado River Aqueduct. You could have ruptures, ground failures, shaking damage, and the question is, how long might it take to return these damaged aqueducts into service? And I could tell you that for many years, MWD and many others have studied this. So it's not just dawning on me as a problem potential. There's a lot of, you know, of very knowledgeable people that have studied this in great detail. So if the aqueducts are out of service, this will result in greater reliance on the Raymond Basin. But will we not have the cushion because it was drained? So that's one of the issues about the Raymond Basin, is that it's a reliability factor that could be lost to us if we allow it to be drained. Now, there's a report that was put out by a group called Zanero, and it was commissioned by PWP. It's an excellent report, and it's a very recent report. It hasn't really been made public, although, you know, I have it and others have it, but not too many people know about this. But this was something that PWP wanted to find out more about. What are the issues around the Raymond Basin? They conclude that in case of an emergency or other things, drought, regulatory constraints, contamination, or earthquake, the Raymond Basin is our only backup. So without a healthy, sustainable basin, there may be no groundwater available for supply during shortage emergencies. So this, I'm just moving through this very quickly. But 35% of our water comes from groundwater, and there are 9 active wells. And so the point of this slide is that they say here that rainfall is the main replenishing source for the basin. Well, that's interesting because rainfall is something that we all pray for, but it does not happen. And the frequency of the rainfall is in question, particularly given climate change. Now, here's the key. Remember I told you that MWD water is 1,078 per acre foot. PWP is paying approximately $500 per acre foot, and that's the pumping and the electric cost to pump the water out. So they have the obvious economic incentive to continue to drain the basin down until they're forced to have to pay with whatever water is left. And this is going to be a big shock to people's rates. But so the question, how do you have a safe yield? And Ken Cools will get into that. This is the slide that we're all talking about, which is a very interesting one. I personally find this to be interesting because I've been watching this for maybe about a decade, and I do not recall PWP ever bringing this slide forward to its citizens. And I'm intrigued by this slide, and I'm interested to understand why it is that it was only 2019 that PWP really made this visible to us all. And I'm asking the City Council, how are they to respond to this? What do they want to do in terms of giving direction to their water department and to the Raymond Basin Management Board, or to the Metropolitan Water District for that matter, on what needs to be done about this? Now, we all know about these. We've got serious water quality issues. I'm not going to go too far down this path, but this stemmed from rocket fuels and so forth from Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It is a serious contamination problem. It's highly carcinogenic. There are other contaminants as well, and it's a central issue. And there's a problem with the perchlorate treatment. And especially because the Sunset Reservoir, which is right next to the 210 and Mountain, that's being shut down. And while it's being shut down and maybe replaced with more reservoir capacity, there's some issues about the perchlorate there. This is what is so fascinating to me, is the conclusion from that Zanero report was that it is not being managed in a sustainable manner, as evidenced by the decrease in basin groundwater levels over the last 118 years. So it's under the threat of spreading contamination as well. So the conclusion from the consultant that PWP commissioned said that PWP and the Raymond Basin Management Board must change its course and take action to prevent permanent failure of the basin. So that, of course, is known fully well by PWP and by the Raymond Basin. They are aware of everything that we're talking about and much, much more. So what's happening here, this gives you an idea of how water is used in Pasadena. You can see that most of it is for single family residences, a lesser amount for multifamily, and this much for commercial and industrial. I find this to be interesting that these lawsuits, that's basically leaking pipes. So we are leaking about 8%. And it could even be more than that. I'm not sure, but it represents not only a waste of water, but it's also lost revenue, because we have to pay for that water one way or another through our rates, and it's leaking. So PWP does want to fix aging infrastructure, and I'm very much in favor of that. Now, but for us to understand that nearly half of Pasadena's water use is consumed by single family residences here. And most of that, probably 70% of that, is for outdoor irrigation, for lawns and trees and so forth. So most of that is used to water landscapes that are not drought sensitive. Now there's an increasing amount of people that are putting in drought sensitive gardens and so forth, but it still is a fairly small fraction. This is an interesting slide that was put out a few years ago in the height of the water crisis back in 2016, when we weren't getting deliveries of water at the levels that we were accustomed to. And so PWP did an analysis of the challenges that they were facing. So most of our water is dedicated to outdoor use, and that includes issues of lot size and everything else. But the thing that is important is how are our rates set? Are these people paying their fair share? I live in an apartment, for example. If I wanted to waste water, it wouldn't amount to much. But there's a lot of people that have big lawns, and they like it that way, and they are not prepared to pay a lot more money. And the PWP understands that, and I think they're overly sensitive to that. But we need to have a new rate option. So, okay, are we paying too much for our water? Well, nobody likes to pay for water bills, but we're paying 136, and look at what it is for the rest of the country, and we're in a semi-arid area. So these are, I'm wrapping this up, Tim. This is about my last slide.
That's great. Thank you, Maury.
Okay, so these are some of the initial recommendations that I've been thinking about, and we need to either reverse or levelize that decline curve. We need to study what the safe yield is, which is that fraction of how much can you safely take out versus how much is being replenished. And most importantly, let the Arroyo Seco flow, because it's going to help replenish the basin. Ken's going to get into that. We need to replace the aging and leaking infrastructure. We need to adopt water conservation as a way of life. And we need that thing I just talked about, which is called budget-based pricing, and it's a rate structure. So what can you do? You could be in touch with your council member and let them know that they need to kind of move up their collective IQ about all of these issues, so that they can have a more informed conversation with PWP. If you want to know how to be in touch with them, just go to their website. So I want to once again thank Tim and Ken for what you've done, and thank you all for attending. If you would like a copy of my PowerPoint, just go ahead and email me and I'll send it to you. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks very much, Maury. Good job.
Okay, thanks.
Now, if you go out, we'll let, now it's Ken Cools, who is an outstanding veteran water engineer who's really dug into these issues and just done a great job. So we're really pleased to have Ken make his presentation on, he's going to focus a little bit more on the Monk Hill Basin, which is part of the bigger Raymond Basin. It's a sub-basin of the Raymond Basin. And he's going to talk about the real impacts of the Arroyo Seco Canyon project. Take it away, Ken.
Introducing myself, Ken Cools. I'm a licensed engineer, Pasadena resident for 29 years. I'm going to start off by describing the Monk Hill Basin. It's up here in the left-hand corner of the Raymond Basin. There are 3 sub-areas. That Monk Hill is one of them, and you're probably familiar. Arroyo Seco spreading grounds are there. JPL, Devil's Gate Dam gives you an idea of location. The groundwater flows in the general direction of that red arrow. And it's quite unusual because the groundwater doesn't follow the surface water hydrologic pattern. The surface water, of course, goes through Devil Gate Dam and ends up in the Los Angeles River, whereas groundwater, if it gets out of Raymond Basin, ends up in the main San Gabriel Basin, and ultimately, which is in the Rio Hondo and the Rio Hondo drainage. What I'm going to show you is a cross-section through the land where that dashed line is, and it's as if you cut slice the land and looking at it from the side. You have Monk Hill Basin here. The dark line there is the bedrock that defines the basin. That little dip there is a cross-section through the Arroyo Seco The Pasadena area is downstream. What you can see is that there's a sort of a dike, if you will, underground dike between that separates the basins. And then the main San Gabriel Basin is there to the right. The water fills up the Monk Hill Basin. Well, it's filled up the Monk Hill Basin, but it continues to replenish the Monk Hill Basin. And when in unusually wet years, there might be a large amount of water flowing from the Monk Hill Basin into the Pasadena area because the bedrock does leak. In drier periods, the flow would be less. Gives you some framework for how the basins work together. I'm going to be talking in the presentation here about acre feet. For those that aren't familiar, it's roughly 200 feet by 200 feet by 1 foot deep. That a tub that size gives you a sense of scale. The Monk Hill safe yield is 7,490 acre feet per year. So there's that size, that tub size, 7,490 of those every year. And Pasadena is entitled to 4,464 acre feet per year. Put that in perspective, Pasadena customers use about 29,000 acre feet per year. I'm going to be talking about CFS though. CFS is a flow measurement to give you some idea. If you were to capture 1 CFS for 24 hours a day, that would amount to about 2 acre feet. 1 CFS captured over a year period is about 724 acre feet. Gives you some sense for what a CFS means in terms of acre feet. So here's a profile of the Monk Hill Basin groundwater at the Rubia Canyon well number 7. And it shows a different picture than it shows for the Pasadena subarea. The graphic that you've seen earlier is for the Pasadena subarea. This is for the Monk Hill area. And I'm going to go through a few milestones that are relevant to replenishment and the health of the basin. The first of which is LA County Department of Public Works built spreading basins back in 1949. And that was the beginning of the operation of spreading by diverting water from the arroyo and putting it in spreading basins. Prior to that, there were a lot of activities related to tunnels that are built underneath Devil's Gate Dam abutment that were originally used to collect water down in the lower part of the arroyo upstream of Devil's Gate Dam. But these are the spreading basins that you've seen the picture of. They were originally built in 1949 by Public Works. Then the Boehner Water Treatment Plant was built. It's a plant, you may have seen it if you walk the Gabrielino Trail. It's up on nestled up on the side of the hill above the trail, roughly around the north end of the spreading basins. That was built to use a 25 CFS surface water right. The Pasadena has a water right that predates the judgment, and they're allocated 25 CFS for diversion. And they first actively started to use that for the replenishment basin, well, for the Boehner Water Treatment Plant in 1969. In 1974, the Raymond Basin judgment was amended to allow Pasadena to take that surface water right and send it to spreading basins. And under that arrangement, they would be allowed to pump, in addition to their safe yield, 80% of what they replenished. The remainder 20% would go to the general basin benefit. And that was an important move, because up until that time, all of the water that came down the arroyo, if it wasn't diverted for Boehner, it went to the spreading basins. However, Boehner plant closed in 1993, and because of water quality regulations that required more stringent filtration that they couldn't accomplish at the site. So they closed, and they no longer had a place to put that 25 CFS of surface water right. The next big milestone was in 1998. LA County Department of Public Works We don't know exactly the story, but they were excused from spreading the basin. Up until that time, they were operating the spreading basins at no charge to the Raymond Basin pumpers. That was free water for the Raymond Basin pumpers, but they ceased their operations in 1998, and Pasadena took over the operation of those basins. What's important here to understand, though, is that their operation of the basins follows a similar rule to the 80-20 rule that I talked about earlier. It's a 60-40 rule, but in any case, for all of the replenishment that's been done since 1998, Pasadena has earned a right to pump more water than the safe yield. So if we look at the water levels, it's a real different picture from the Pasadena sub-area. It's generally flat, except for in the 50s and 60s when there was a sustained dry period. But other than that time, you could argue that it's been relatively flat. It actually improved in the period from 2001 through 2011, and that was related to the fact that Pasadena and other pumpers downstream of JL, they had to curtail their pumping because of perchlorate contamination. They were told to shut down their wells, and that allowed the basin to recover fairly significantly. However, following 2011, the groundwater declined precipitously, and I attribute that to the fact that the treatment plant for perchlorate went into operation then, as well as coincidentally, that's the beginning of a 5-year drought that ended in 2016. But what's important to note here is the previous historic low level in the Monk Hill Basin back in 1955 was quite a bit higher. In fact, it was about 30 feet higher. The previous historic low was 30 feet higher than the current low. But if you compare that to the decline since the original judgment, it's been an 80-foot decline. Now that may not seem like much in comparison to the Pasadena area, but keep in mind that in that graphic I showed you earlier, the Monk Hill Basin is much shallower. And so the 80-foot decline has a fairly significant impact. So now I'm going to get into the project. So this is a cartoon. I know it doesn't look much like what the actual is, but just for purposes of display, JPL is located about there, Hahamungna Watershed Park. And the diversion dam that feeds the spreading is located, I think it's about a half mile upstream of the JPL bridge. Coming from that diversion dam, there's what's called the Hume pipeline. It's a 30-inch pipeline that brings water down to the spreading basins. The capacity of the diversion dam is 25 CFS. That's a flow rate. And that is the limiting factor for operating the diversion. And how it limits the operation is that when water begins to flow at about 25 CFS, the water starts bringing with it sediment, and the sediment plugs the pipeline if you leave the intake open beyond 25 CFS. So they have to shut down the intake to the Hume pipeline when the flows reach 25 CFS. The Hume pipeline has a large capacity. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly higher than the amount needed to take the surface water right. The spreading basins, the existing capacity of the spreading basins to percolate is 18 CFS. That's the limiting factor. And the reason it's limiting is because if you feed it more water, the basins, the recharge basins there will overflow. So you can only divert through the Hume pipeline 18 CFS under the current condition. This is going to be important, so if you can pay attention to this one. The stream capacity has a 6.5 CFS capacity to percolate. However, the stream plus the pond, if a pond forms behind Devil's Gate Dam, has a 23 CFS capacity to percolate. Compare that to the 18 CFS capacity in the spreading basins. So there's greater capacity in ponding than there is in the spreading basins. However, under historic operations, there was a lower outlet that allowed water to pass through Devil's Gate Dam. But under the Big Dig settlement, and I give Tim a lot of kudos for pushing for this, the Public Works is required to shut down that lower outlet and allow ponding through the month of June each year. So what is the Arroyo Seco Canyon project? Simply, it's proposing a 7 CFS expansion of spreading basin capacity to 25 CFS, the surface water right that they have. And it proposes to alter the diversion dam to eliminate that 25 CFS constraint, and it will allow the diversion to operate up to 100 CFS. That's in a nutshell exactly what they're proposing. I commented that on my comments on the draft EIR that this project has the potential to harm the Monk Hill Basin. And to paraphrase that, their response, basically, they've said the entire increment of water that they're capturing by the ASCP expansion would not have percolated behind Devil's Gate Dam. Well, let's talk about how we measure percolation and infiltration. It's a rate of flow in gallons per minute or cubic feet per second. And it's actually, this is a description of how they actually determine what the percolation capacity is. You pour water out of a bucket or out of a hose or out of whatever you got into a pit, a dug pit that you have, you know, the dimensions of. You pour water into there. And of course, while you're pouring water in, water will be flowing into the ground. And when you reach a point where you have equilibrium, which is water in equals water out, that defines your percolation capacity, again, in the flow rate, GPM or CFS. So I'm going to walk you through 6 scenarios, 3 existing condition and 3 proposed, to demonstrate in simple terms how the project will harm the groundwater basin. So the first slide here, I'm going to be showing an assumed inflow of 18 CFS, and I've got a legend here so you can follow the pictures. So when you have 18 CFS coming down to the diversion dam, because the diversion dam has an 18 CFS diversion capacity, all of that will be diverted. Nothing will go downstream, nothing will percolate in the stream bed, and nothing will reach the dam. Under the assumption that you have 20 CFS coming into the diversion dam, you only have 18 CFS being diverted. That's just the capacity of the spreading basins. 2 CFS will flow down the creek or down the arroyo. That 2 CFS will be captured. And we know that because, seems that I've skipped a slide here, I'm not sure. There was a report done in 2000 by Philip Williams Associates that said that the stream bed percolation capacity is 6.5 CFS. So all of that 2 CFS will go into the ground and nothing will reach the dam. So this is the first instance where they're going to be capturing water that in fact does not go through the dam. The third scenario is 25 CFS coming in, 18 CFS being captured, 7 CFS bypassing the diversion dam. 6.5 of that CFS will be captured in the stream bed, and half CFS will reach the dam, but all of that will be captured in the ponding area because the capacity of the ponding area is 23 CFS. So this pretty much shows that yes, water will be captured that wouldn't have gone through the dam. So here I'm going to talk about the proposed project condition. Again, here we've added new pumping and new spreading as one of the metrics that we're going to be talking about. So you have 18 CFS coming down, 18 CFS being diverted, nothing going downstream, nothing percolating into the ground, no additional spreading in the basins, and therefore no additional pumping. This would be the pumping that would be earned under the spreading or the diversion credit. And there's no water reaching the dam, pretty much the existing condition. So there's no change from the existing condition. Under the 22 CFS scenario, you'll have, 20 CFS scenario, you'll have all 20 CFS being diverted, nothing going downstream, nothing going into the stream bed for percolation, 2 CFS additional spreading, and Pasadena will have the right to pump an additional 1.6 CFS, and nothing goes to the dam. In this situation, what you see is you see a net loss to the basin of 1.6 CFS capacity. That extra pumping is all lost from the basin. The last scenario is 25 CFS, which is the surface water spreading capacity or surface water diversion capacity. All 25 CFS will be diverted. Nothing going to the stream bed for the Arroyo stream bed for percolation, 7 additional CFS of spreading, 5.6 CFS of additional pumping, and again, nothing going to the reaching the dam. So you have a net basin replenishment of a negative 5.6 CFS. Basically, that 1.6 or 5.6, depending on the flow rate, that's all being lost because of the project. So how does this translate to groundwater impacts and quantitatively? I built a spreadsheet model that looks at on a daily basis over 30 years. This spreadsheet is almost 11,000 rows long. I've applied all of the operational criteria based on the slides that I've just shown you. And what the model does is it uses 30 years of USGS gauge daily mean flow data, the same as PWP used in the draft EIR. It replicates the numbers in the draft EIR. I've actually been able to make this model, show that this model works just like PWP's model. But it concludes that 552 acre feet per year, or 7.4% of the basin safe yield, will be lost from the Monk Hill Basin. So that 2 or 7 CFS, that translates to 552 acre feet per year lost from the Monk Hill Basin. What does this mean? Well, at the same time that Monk Hill Basin's groundwater levels have declined, Pasadena is proposing to mine the basin further. Other projects in the water system resources plan that have the potential to harm Monk Hill groundwater levels similar to the ASCP. There's a local non-potable water project, a Devil's Gate pumpback project, a plan to move water from the Arroyo Seco to Eaton Canyon for replenishment, and claiming credits for what they call natural infrastructure, which is just selective removal of water-hungry plants in the arroyo. So what's next? And this has been talked about, but I'll summarize it again. There's a conditional use permit hearing that's scheduled for December, this coming December, next month. Whether it'll go to the MSC for their review before going to the council is uncertain. We believe they're planning on issuing the final EIR in 2021 with the city council final certification in January. Again, these are uncertain dates, but this is what's coming at us next. But I will also point out that there's $2.5 million scheduled in the 2022 capital budget for this project. If you want this copy of this presentation, you can go to Tim's Water Crisis website, and I think we're ready for questions.
All right, now we have a question from William Kelly, and the question is, How could Pasadena have just one vote on the Raymond Basin Board, the same as a golf course and a cemetery? Is there something wrong with this picture? Well, Pasadena has one vote, but it's a weighted vote. Pasadena has 41% of the voting power on the Raymond Basin Board, so considerably more than anyone else, and but not a majority. And it was all part of the original adjudication that went on in the 40s and early 50s. So there is the golf course and the cemetery and Huntington Gardens. They all have voting rights, but they're much less proportionately. So, although generally, they do often vote, just one person, one vote. Even though there is weighted voting for key issues. What happens to the diverted water? Well, most of the diverted water goes into spreading basins, as Ken pointed out, and goes into the groundwater basin, but most of it will also be pumped out again fairly quickly. So there's a limited long-term storage value from it. All right, Connie says thanks. Jody says thanks. Michelle Forrest says thanks. Michelle lives right up there by where the spreading basins are going to be, as a matter of fact, just above them there. All right, Connie says thanks. What's a reasonable alternative to the plan? Well, Ken, would you like to respond to that?
Well, one alternative is not to pump more. Go ahead and do the spreading, but not pump more. But of course, that's an activity that should be, in my mind, that should be done by the Raymond Basin Management Board. Certainly, Pasadena could be the agent for the management board, but it's the pumping that's really the problem. It's not so much the spreading in terms of the basin health. But there are other alternatives. One is to use imported water from the State Water Project. Another one, there's a recycling plant that's being built in the south corner of the city of Los Angeles that is going to recycle and treat wastewater to potable purposes. And that's available to metropolitan member agencies. It's not cheap, however. It is terribly reliable, though, because everybody poops. So those are the two that kind of come to mind immediately. The only other alternative is just to reduce pumping.
Yeah, let me jump in. That the basin pumpers observed this decline 12 to 15 years ago. And based on the decline, particularly in the Pasadena sub-area of the basin, they eventually agreed to reduce pumping in the main basin by 30%. So they have reduced pumping by 30%, but they made up for it with storage programs and other ways. So in effect, they didn't really reduce pumping. However, the technical report that suggested that they needed to stop overpumping the basin actually suggested that they should have stopped 50% pumping, but they didn't do that. So we say that we need to heal the basin, and it needs to be a priority of Pasadena, and it needs to be backed up by citizens, that we need to heal the basin and stop the drawdown of the basin. So stop overpumping and stop an over-reliance on projects that are basically related to pumping more water out of the groundwater until we have a way of adequately replenishing the basin and ensuring that that groundwater level isn't going to fall any further. Now, at that time, in the late 10 years ago, they actually set a goal of trying to raise the level in the basin by 50 feet. And as you can see, it's now at, roughly in the range of between 450 and 500 feet down. And so 50 feet, would be a significant increase in that, but it can't keep going down much further. So healing the basin is a very important goal that really needs to be a priority for Pasadena right from the beginning. But that's not reflected in the water resources plan. Excuse my pumping there. I think he hears one of you people, and he's really concerned. But um, the actual water system and resources plan sets as a goal maximizing the value of groundwater, which is just the reverse of what ought to be the priority of Pasadena at this time in history. So anyway, that's going to be a very important step to take. It's going to be difficult for the city to do because it's going to be expensive, but the long-term consequences of not doing it will be far more expensive.
I'd like to add something, if I could, Tim.
Sure, Maury, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the question was, what kind of alternatives? And we've mentioned not pumping it as much, and that's obvious. But there's also, and then Ken mentioned this wastewater treatment facility that will eventually provide us with a new source of water from Carson area. That could be 5, 6, 7 years away. It's a multi-billion-dollar thing, but it's going to be very important. But the other one is conservation and efficiency.
Yes.
And that's what I'm quite interested in. And that's why I put this particular slide up, because it's been pointed out that only $12 million has been allocated according to their preferred plan and that's over a 25-year period. So you do the math, it's very little money that's going into conservation. So if we want people to convert their yards to something which is less water intensive, so that we could conserve our way through this, at least to an extent, there doesn't seem to be enough emphasis on that. And then on top of that, it's the water, it's the efficiency issue of, and that gets to that slide that here, which is the use inside the city, and how people are paying, and how much they're paying for their water bills. So this is the source of the income to PWP, and a lot of it is for irrigation of their landscapes. And so this is going to be a big issue. So conservation and efficiency are two other big elements.
Excellent, Maury. And I know that we have here tonight a lot of the customers of Among Native Plant Nursery, and some of the people who really make it happen. Portia and Parker are both here joining us. And Pasadena really needs to adopt a program to transform landscaping in Pasadena and eventually in Southern California. A single detached house, usually half of the water use is outdoors. So outdoor water use is really the main target for real substantial conservation in the future. And the best way to do it is to use low water use native plants. Native plants use 1/7 the amount of water as more typical irrigated landscaping, and they're beautiful and more characteristic of the nature of this area as well. So we're pleased that Pasadena Water and Power has supported our nursery by buying water for us. We like that, but we hope that to join with them in a real far-reaching educational campaign to transform landscaping in Southern California. Now, I noticed that someone made a point here about Brad Lancaster and permeable pavement and other steps like that. So, the steps that can be taken in terms of urban water use, stormwater capture, rain barrels, rainwater catchment, and really using swales in people's yards and other steps like that can also contribute positively, as well as gray water. So there's a variety of other uses of other new kind of emerging technologies that can be used. And you may know that a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, I guess, on the ballot, you voted to give the County Department of Public Works $300 million a year to do stormwater capture. So we're going to see a lot more stormwater capture in the future in Southern California, and hopefully it'll capture a lot of that rainfall and put it into groundwater basins where it can be used for the future, which is kind of reversing the trend of history, because what we've really been doing over the last 150 years is paving everything and destroying the ability of the earth to absorb the water and put it into the groundwater basin. So just that kind of paving, and the urban facilities and such are really a large part of the declining groundwater basin. The other point that we should make, in terms of the history of water use here, was that really the decline in groundwater basins began right around the turn of the last century, and it was directly related to both urban paving and other steps like that. But probably more important even than that was the advent of the hydraulic pump, which was a whole new technology which enabled them to pump a lot more water a lot faster than they used to be able to do. So we need to be ingenious for the future and coming up with ways to better capture rainwater and to do the kind of conservation that Maury's talking about. And one of the goals that they're setting is they do want to get people transforming their landscaping, but it's hard to imagine that they're going to accomplish a lot with only $12 million over 25 years, because that's $500,000 a year. It's not really very much money. And, a lot more money in the department is going to be going to all sorts of other projects. For instance, fixing aging pipes in the distribution system, they estimate it's going to cost $300 million a year. Well, there needs to be a change, really, I think, in the water system and resources plan that emphasizes conservation as a much more integral part of building this resilient supply for the future. That's what resilient means. So, all right, did we have some more questions that come in there? Let's see. Michelle recognizes my dog, Sage. Jody says, I talked with my city council person about permeable pavement 11 years ago. She hasn't done anything to move the ball forward. Yeah, there's a lot of dreams that really need to be implemented in the future. A steep tier system could finance the xeriscape efforts. Yeah, that's right. A budget approach, as Maury talked about, and that's something that we could talk about more in the future, that would really give people a basic amount of water for a reasonable price, and then, would assess higher rates related to that, would definitely have a big conservation impact. And so there are concerns, and 218 is the proposition that's held up a lot of that kind of stuff. So there are ways, though, that we need to be ingenious in the future about inventing ways, and certainly rates are a very important part of, they're a real important conservation tool. All right, so William Kelly notes the county ordinance that was passed to raise property taxes to deal with stormwater runoff, incentivize the removal of non-permeable pavement. We're moving forward soon with making the incentive available in South Pasadena. Well, that's great. And all of the communities in Los Angeles County are going to benefit from that program. And we need to make sure that they're using it effectively in ways that are truly efficient and that provide for real conservation and just don't build a lot of engineering facilities. You already know. Okay, so we had, let's see, what else? My comments thing is jumping around here. All right. Soil microbiology needs to add organic matter to the soil. Good point. So regenerative landscaping is really important, and adding organic material to the soil and using composting effectively is also very important. Using swales and other rain garden kind of tools is a good way to do it. William Kelly says, thanks everyone. I have to tune into the city council meeting. Good luck there, William. Thank you. Good presentations, he says. And I think that's the end of it, isn't it? I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Water is often neglected, and it's been underpriced. And part of the reason they've been pumping the groundwater more than they really should have been doing is because it's cheaper than Metropolitan Water District water. And that's just a fact. But Metropolitan Water District water might not always be there. And we need to have that groundwater resource to provide us security of supply. And if we manage it effectively, if we bring back the level to some extent by careful use, it'll take a long time probably to do. To recover a significant amount in the Raymond Basin is going to take many years. But I think that we need to begin now by stabilizing the supply so that it doesn't, the groundwater level, so that it doesn't go lower, and try to, in the next 20 years, really recapture some of that lost storage space there. put some water into there through a variety of different techniques, such as we've been discussing here tonight. So I want to thank you for joining us here. I want to make a connection with climate change, because often people miss the connection between climate change and water. A lot of the climate change activists have been very focused, like you, Maury, on transportation and energy and that sort of thing. But many of the impacts of climate change are going to be felt primarily through water. Water is the way that most people are probably going to really experience the real impacts of climate change. Everything from, coastal cities being swamped by seawater to stormwater to floods occasionally, erratic weather, and drought conditions, which are probably going to last longer in the future. All of those things are all impacts of climate change. So if you really want to be effective with regard to climate change, one of the most effective ways is to learn about your local water system with presentations like we've had tonight, and to get involved and be active citizens promoting a resilient water strategy for the future. And I really do want to commend Governor Newsom for his leadership in that area. It's really very worthwhile to read the policy documents that are coming out of the state government, because they really are dealing in an integrated way with the environmental impacts and with all of the water resources issues. So thanks very much to Maury. You did a terrific job, Maury, of summing up the program. And Ken, you're always awesome. I love the way you break down these discussions, and you make it real clear what the ultimate real effects and purpose of these programs are. And all of a sudden, when it hits you in the face of this program, the Arroyo Seco Canyon project, looks like it's going to help the groundwater basins, but it's not. And when you realize that, it kind of makes you reconsider the whole program. So anyway, I urge everybody to do that and to get involved in these things in the future. Stay in touch with us, contact your city council person, and let's turn out for a real resilient water program for the future. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Tim.
And with that, I
Thanks, Tim.
say good night.
Good night.